I came to the lighthouse to be alone, but now, every night, someone is down there in the dark, calling my name from the waves. I took the job because I wanted to disappear. 2 weeks earlier, I'd quit everything: my job, my apartment, social media, the whole mess of it. I'd had enough of the city, of people, of noise. I needed quiet. So when I found the listing for a 6-month lighthouse contract on a remote stretch of the coast, I didn't hesitate. There were no footprints, no boats on the horizon, no signs anyone had been near. Still, that night, I kept the lantern on longer than usual. "Storm season's picking up," she said. "You're probably hearing rocks shifting. Happens." I told her the voice knew my name. There was a pause. Then she sighed. "There's a reason we don't keep people at that station anymore," she said quietly. "The last few posted there didn't handle it well. They pulled me out 3 weeks early after I stopped sending reports. Sighed I'd been unresponsive. I told them everything. They said they'd investigate, but I haven't heard back. I looked up the last keeper stationed there before me. He was a man named 𝗥𝗲𝗀 𝗀𝗀. He went missing in 1998. His body was never found. But the last thing he wrote in the logbook, according to a news clipping I dug up, was this: "They're calling me from the tide. They know my name." "What does that mean?" I asked. But she only said, "Stay inside at night. We'll arrange relief for next month's drop." Back in my apartment, as I was dozing off, I heard something faint from the open window. A whisper, tangled in wind. "Daniel." And then the sound of water dripping onto the floor. By the end of the 2nd week, I was hearing it every night. Always after midnight. That night, I didn't sleep. The voice came again around 2:30 a.m., clearer than ever. "Daniel, it's safe now. You can come down." I gripped the edge of the window and stared into the darkness below. It was high tide. The sea smashed into the rocks just 50 feet from the tower. There was nowhere for a person to stand. No beach, no ledge, no boat. Yet I swear to you, there were footsteps on the rocks. I heard them, crunching slowly across the shale, circling the base of the lighthouse, stopping just below the window. Then, laughter, wet and broken, always from outside. "Daniel." That's what made it worse. It knew my name. That was the first time I truly felt fear settle into my bones. Not just unease, but something deeper. Like I had opened a door I couldn't close. The next morning, I found seaweed on the front step. Not drift, not scattered debris. It was coiled, like it had been placed there. A single footprint bare. Human was pressed into the drying algae. I stopped going outside after that. Stopped looking out the windows. Stopped responding. I started locking every interior door at night, not just the front hatch. Sometimes it sounded close, just beneath the lighthouse, at the edge of the rocks. Sometimes it screamed high, guttural, not like a man. And sometimes I'd hear it upstairs, in the lamp room, pacing. The stairs to the top of the tower are metal. They ring when stepped on. And some nights, after midnight, I'd hear them groaning as if someone was coming down. I never went up to check. I just sat in the corner of my room with the flashlight and the satellite phone clutched to my chest. Other times it echoed from farther down the cliff, as if the tide itself was whispering it through gritted teeth. "Daniel," drawn out, almost pleading. Once it laughed. The offer was simple. I'd monitor the automated systems, do basic upkeep, keep the generator running, and send daily reports back to the department. I'd lie in bed, lights off, covers pulled up, listening to that voice drift and twist through the wind. By the 3rd week, I started replying. "Who's out there?" I'd shout through the kitchen window. "Do you need help?" No answer. The rational part of me said it was just isolation messing with my head. Auditory hallucinations. Stress. But the other part, the part I couldn't shake, felt watched, observed, like whoever was down there didn't want help. They just wanted me to come outside. Supplies were dropped once a month by boat. No visitors. No cell reception. Just me, the sea, and the gulls. Perfect. The first week was peaceful. I read, cooked, walked the cliffs. The only sound was the distant churn of the ocean and the groaning of the wind around the tower. I didn't even miss the outside world. But on the 8th night, just after 2 I woke up to the sound of someone calling my name. It was faint, so faint, I wasn't sure I'd really heard it. I sat up, heart ticking faster, and waited. Nothing. I shook it off. Probably a dream, or the wind playing tricks. But something about it bothered me. It hadn't sounded like wind. It had sounded wet, like it had been gargled through salt water. The next morning, I checked the base of the tower and the surrounding cliffs. I stopped sleeping through the night. I finally called it in. Used the backup satellite phone in the storage room to contact the department. The woman on the other end sounded annoyed. That didn't sit right with me. Relief? No one was supposed to come until the 6 months were up. I backed away from the window and turned off every light in the tower. And the voice changed. It got angry. It didn't call my name anymore. It just laughed. Long, howling laughs that turned to sobs. I'm home now. So no, I wasn't imagining it. And I don't think it's done with me. Because just last night, a voice over the radio begged for help, screaming that something was inside the lighthouse. But I found out later the man had already been dead for 2 days when I heard his call. I worked as a night radio operator for coastal emergency services up in Maine. Our post was a small concrete building just inland from the shoreline, monitoring channels for distress signals from passing ships, weather alerts, and the occasional call from isolated lighthouse keepers still stationed along the rocks. We rarely got anything urgent. The job was mostly quiet cold coffee, steady static, and long hours of silence, but I liked it. Especially at night. It felt safe, like the sea couldn't touch me from behind those walls. Until one night last October. It was just after 2 The air was dense with fog, thick enough that even the parking lot light barely pierced through. I was alone flipping through old logbooks out of boredom when the static on Channel 16 broke. Mayday, this is Pine Hollow Light. I repeat, Pine Hollow Light, please, someone respond. I dropped the logbook. The voice was frantic, raspy, like someone who'd been screaming for hours. I keyed the mic. Pine Hollow, this is Echo Base. Go ahead. There was a long pause. Then the voice came back, strained and cracking with terror. It's in the tower. Something got in. I tried locking it out, but static hissed for a second. It's clawing up the stairs. Please send someone, send. Then silence. I sat frozen. Not because of the message itself, but because of who I'd just spoken to. The keeper assigned to Pine Hollow was Richard Mallory, an old-timer. I'd spoken to him dozens of times before, routine check-ins. That voice? That was definitely Mallory. No signs of forced entry. But that wasn't the worst part. Almost like something else was speaking with him, or through him. But something about it was off. It had this low, dragging tone beneath it. Looked like he'd fallen from a height. But according to the search team, there were deep gouges in the stairwell railing. Like something with claws had been dragging itself upward. I tried calling back. Pine Hollow, this is Echo Base. Do you read? Nothing. Within minutes, a search boat had been launched from harborside. I sat there staring at the radio, waiting for the team to check in. I switched to the emergency dispatch line, called it in. About an hour later, I got a call from the team lead. His voice was flat, confused. They'd found the lighthouse completely locked from the inside, followed by a deep, wet exhale, almost like something breathing right beside the microphone. Richard Mallory was dead. No reason he would have been in the upper stairwell. Had been for 2 days. They found his body at the base of the stairs, cold and stiff. They even joked about it, said maybe Mallory had a raccoon problem. I didn't laugh. I told them about the call. The voice. How he'd said something got into the tower. They went quiet on the line. Then the team lead said something that chilled me. That's not possible. The radio equipment here isn't functional. The wires are rotted out. The whole panel's been offline for months. I didn't say anything, because that's not all I'd heard in the transmission. How Mallory's voice didn't sound like it was coming from the lighthouse, but through it. When I played it back later from our backup tape, right before the final burst of static, there's this sound, faint but unmistakable. Don't even like looking at water if I can help it. A low, rhythmic scraping, like nails on concrete. They ruled Mallory's death an accident. Sighed he slipped while doing maintenance. But there was no sign of repair tools anywhere. Nothing disturbed. And no one explained how I got that transmission. They checked my logs, of course, reviewed the tapes, and yes, there it was. His voice, his call sign, his screams. Only now, listening back, I noticed something else. Between the bursts of static, just beneath Mallory's desperate pleas, there's a whisper. Too low to hear clearly without headphones. But if you isolate it, amplify it, and slow it down just a little, you can make it out. It's not in English, but it says my name. I quit the job a few weeks later. I don't live near the coast anymore, but I still think about that call. Like the building was echoing something that had already happened, or something that hadn't stopped. Sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I hear static. And on the worst nights, I hear his voice again. Only now, he doesn't beg for help. He asks me to come up the stairs. I didn't write the final page of the logbook, but the handwriting was mine, and it described my death in detail. A few years ago, I took a temporary job as a lighthouse caretaker off the coast of Maine. The regular keeper, an older guy named Delaney, had reportedly gone missing. A helicopter dropped me on the island with a duffel bag, a week's worth of canned food, and a brief rundown from a gruff, disinterested officer who left as fast as he arrived. The Coast Guard said he left in the middle of the night during a storm. No trace of him was found. His boat was still docked, door locked from the inside. Just ... gone. The keeper's quarters were claustrophobic, but warm, with a wood stove that cracked and popped like it was trying to speak. There was an old logbook on the desk, thick, leather-bound, filled with years of scrawled entries. I didn't ask too many questions. I needed the work, and they needed someone to keep the light running until they figured out a replacement. It was just me, the sea, and the tower. The first day passed uneventfully. The lighthouse was old but sturdy. Most were mundane. Wind picking up from the northeast. Light rotation, slow-oiled gears. Seals seen on southern rocks. The sea did weird things to people after enough time. Just the kind of instinctive jolt that makes your chest tighten. The last entry from Delaney was dated 6 days before I arrived. The temperature felt 10 degrees colder inside the tower than outside. The mechanism wasn't jammed. It was as if it had been. When I spun around, I was alone. Whatever, shut off. But I hadn't touched the breaker. The beam cut clean through the fog like a blade, swinging in a slow mechanical rhythm. Everything was working fine. That's when I noticed a fresh entry had already been written, dated today, in handwriting that looked exactly like mine. Something out there, moving between the rocks. Can't get a clear look. Light keeps going out at 3:17 Once or twice, I swore I heard something knock on the base of the tower from outside, but when I looked through the slit window, there was nothing but swirling mist and the dark shape of the rocks below. I laughed it off as isolation madness. Cabin fever. That night, I climbed to the top of the tower to check the lens. Still, I didn't sleep well. The wind moaned like a wounded animal through the cracks in the glass. On my third night, I woke suddenly. I didn't know why at first. No sound, no light shift. I checked the time, 3:17 A. The light had stopped. The rotation motor was silent. I climbed the steps barefoot, flashlight in hand, breath fogging with every exhale. When I reached the top, the lens wasn't turning. The strange thing was, I could see the reflection of the lens in the curved glass, and just for a second, I thought I saw someone standing behind me in it. I tried to brush it off. Power issues. Isolation hallucinations. The next morning, I went back to the logbook to write about the light failure. The wood stove refused to light, and the temperature kept dropping. I brought the logbook, a lantern, and a hammer. I told myself I'd wait out the last few days, get back on the chopper, and never speak about this again. I layered all the blankets I could find, but it didn't help. It said, woke at 3:17 a.m., light out again. Saw something in reflection, feels colder in the tower. Rip out whatever sick prank someone had played. But when I opened the logbook, the pages were blank, every single one, as if nothing had ever been written in it at all. I hadn't written it, but it was my handwriting, even down to the way I crossed my 7 south. I flipped forward. There were more entries, pages of them, written in my style, describing things I hadn't experienced yet. Scratches heard beneath floorboards. Voice outside sounds like Delaney. Don't go to the rocks. Something is waiting beneath the tower. That night, I barely slept. The air inside felt thick, like breathing through wet cloth. At 3:17 a.m., I heard a sound from beneath the trapdoor at the base of the lighthouse steps. A scraping almost like nails on concrete. Then a whisper, "Let me in." I didn't move. The next day, I decided to tear out the pages. That night, I locked myself in the top of the tower. At 3:17, the light died, and in the reflection of the glass, I saw my own face staring back at me. Only I wasn't moving. I left the next morning. Didn't to wait for pickup. I used the backup dinghy and rowed for hours until I hit the coast. When I told the Coast Guard I quit, I didn't mention the logbook, or the voice, or the reflection. I just said I wasn't cut out for isolation work. But here's why I'm telling you this now. Last week, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was the Lighthouse logbook. On the final page, there's a new entry written in my handwriting, dated tomorrow. It reads, "Return to the island." Sighed he wouldn't, but he did. This time, he won't leave. I swear I saw someone in the lantern room, just standing behind the beam as it swept the ocean. But when I radioed the Coast Guard, they told me something that made my stomach drop. That lighthouse has been abandoned since 2008. I've been a lobster fisherman most of my life. I've seen rough seas, thick fog. It was just me on the boat. I've always worked solo, especially in the off-season. The wind started turning violent. Not enough to panic, but enough that I figured I had maybe an hour before it got worse. I was about 8 nautical miles from shore, off a stretch of coast we call Black Point. There's an old lighthouse there, up on a jagged cliff that looks like something out of a Gothic painting. Everyone around here knows it. Engine failure in the middle of nowhere, you name it. But nothing has stuck with me the way that night did. It happened 3 winters ago, off the coast of Nova Scotia. I was out late chasing a storm window. You get good hauls after bad weather, and I wanted to drop traps before the waves picked up again. Wide beam, it was comforting in a way. That is, until the beam passed over my boat. After a few minutes, a calm voice came through Officer Donnelly. I explained where I was and asked if they had someone up at the station on Black Point, just like it used to. It's moving well, was moving. It's locked on me now. Then, at first, I was relieved. I figured maybe someone had finally restored it. That light used to be a lifesaver during storms. Just a flicker of a shadow passing behind the lens room glass, like someone walking. But it had been shut down years ago when the coast automated newer beacons further inland. The rain made visibility awful, but I could just make out a figure. Around 10:30 white, cutting clean across the Black Sea like it never stopped working. The weird part was how erratic it seemed. It wasn't rotating smoothly. Sometimes the beam would stall mid-turn and jerk ahead like it was catching on something. And that's when I saw the light. It swept across the water slow, but there it was bright, still, and stopped. It froze on me. The light was so intense, it felt like standing under a helicopter spotlight. I squinted up toward the cliffs and could just barely make out the dark silhouette of the lighthouse. Not for a second. The light didn't move. It stayed locked on me. I turned the engine over so fast, I nearly flooded it. I steered hard east, away from the cliff, away from the lighthouse, and didn't slow down until I could see the glow of town lights on the horizon. I grabbed the radio and called out, "This is the Artemis off Black Point. Anyone at the lighthouse? Do you copy?" Nothing, just static. I tried again, this time reaching the Coast Guard. There was a pause. "Sir, Black Point Light has been decommissioned since 2008. No one should be out there." I remember repeating that sentence back to him slowly, like it hadn't quite registered. But ... the light is on. Another pause. "Are you absolutely certain?" I didn't respond right away, because as I looked up at the beam, I thought I saw something move in front of it. My boat still has the scars from that night's salt pitting on the hull that wasn't there the day before. Quick to dismiss it. Probably heat lightning. They say I've had priests bless it. Burned sage. Nothing helps. I grabbed my binoculars. A man, maybe. Or at least a human shape. He or it was standing behind the glass at the top of the tower, unmoving. I lowered the binoculars. And that's when the light snapped off. 1 second I was flooded with white. The next pitch black. No moon, no stars, no beam. Just the wind, the creaking of the hull, and a ringing in my ears like the silence was pressing in on me. Then the radio crackled back to life. But it wasn't the Coast Guard. It was just breathing. Low, steady, like someone standing far too close to the mic. I stared at the radio, not touching it. It wasn't my transmission. The breathing stopped, and a voice dry, whispering spoke just one word. Closer. I didn't wait. The next day, the weather had cleared. I called Officer Donnelly again, told him everything. I begged him to send someone to check the lighthouse. He told me they did. No one was there. No signs of recent entry. The access road was washed out and overgrown. The lens room padlocked. And the power? Completely disconnected. Has been for over 15 years. I asked if there was any explanation. He told me something strange, though he didn't mean to. Apparently, I wasn't the first to report seeing the light. 2 years before, a cargo ship claimed to have seen it flashing during a storm. The first mate even logged it in their report. That ship ran aground the same night right off the coast of Black Point. No survivors. I don't fish that stretch anymore. I won't even sail past it. Every so often, during storm season, other fishermen mention strange flashes on the cliffs. But I know better. Because sometimes, when I'm up late in the harbor, I see a faint glow on the horizon, where the lighthouse used to shine. And every time ... I get this sick feeling in my gut, like something is still watching me from the top of that tower, waiting for me to come back. I saw someone watching me from the top of the lighthouse, but when I climbed all the way up, the hatch to the lens room was still padlocked from the inside. Nothing glamorous, just scheduled inspections on old, rarely used stations up and down the coast. Most were automated by then, but they still needed someone to physically check wiring, stairs, and lens alignment a couple times a year. It had been out of commission for decades. No electricity running to it, no nearby structures. Just gulls, cold wind, and salt-blasted concrete, like the atmosphere had thickened. The fog hadn't lifted yet, and it hung low in vents, muting every sound except the crash of waves far below. I used to work lighthouse maintenance for the state. The lower floors are always the worst damp, echoey, with rusted pipes groaning every time you shift your weight. One of those sites was 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗏 Light. It was one of the taller towers on the coast, perched on a stretch of cliff that jutted out over gray, churning sea. That day, I'd driven up the old access road after a storm had passed through. I was the only one on schedule for 𝗥𝗲𝗀𝗏, and that was fine by me. I usually preferred working solo. The moment I stepped out of the truck, I knew something felt off. Not dangerous, just heavy. I walked to the base of the tower with my gear, flashlight already in hand, even though it was daytime. I started my inspection. Wiring was decayed, but expected. No major structural issues. Some seaweed had made it up into the stairwell from a recent surge. Same old. No one was supposed to enter. The lamp had been stripped out years ago. The whole room was sealed off and froze. About halfway up, I heard something. It wasn't loud, more like a shuffle. Very faint. Above me, I paused, waited. The final staircase ends at a heavy steel hatch that leads up into the lens room, the top of the lighthouse, where the actual lamp and frontal glass sit. Nothing. Chalked it up to the metal stairs settling. Could have been my own echo. You get used to weird noises in those towers. The wind plays tricks. By the time I reached the top level, my legs were burning. Except this hatch had been padlocked shut since before I was assigned to the circuit. So I took the stairs up to the hatch, took them two at a time. I turned to make my last notes. Something caught my eye movement behind the glass dome above me. I looked up, and for a second, I thought I was hallucinating. There was a face in the lens room, pressed right up against the glass. White as chalk, gaunt, sunken eyes, just watching me. My first instinct was that someone had broken in. Maybe a squatter, though I had no idea how they could have gotten up there without breaking the lock. I stood there for maybe 3 or 4 seconds, locked in place, staring up at this unmoving face. Then I grabbed the radio, called base, told them I might have a trespasser, possibly dangerous. The dispatcher said they'd notify local authorities, but warned it could take a while. 𝗥𝗲𝗏𝗏 was remote, and the weather had left some roads muddy and half washed out. It's a narrow strip, just enough to see light or darkness inside. I decided to make sure whoever it was didn't leave before help arrived. I figured if the lock had been broken or picked, I'd wait for backup. But if not, maybe I'd imagined it. When I got to the hatch, I stopped cold. The padlock was still intact. Waited by the truck until a local deputy showed up nearly an hour later. Rusty, unmoved. There was even cobwebs between the latch and the hinge. No signs of tampering. My heart started pounding, not because I was scared exactly, but because the logic didn't add up. I banged on the hatch, yelled, "Hey, I saw you up there. Come out." No answer. The deputy even commented, "You'd see marks if someone had their face up here." I called again. Nothing. Eventually, I leaned down and looked through the small viewing slit near the edge of the hatch. It was pitch black. I turned on my flashlight and aimed it through. The beam lit up part of the metal floor. And I swear to you, I saw something move just beyond the beam, like it ducked just out of view. I stumbled back, flashlight trembling in my grip. I knew then, if someone was in there, they hadn't gotten in through the hatch. I left the tower. We went up together, both of us breathing hard by the time we reached the top. When he saw the lock was still in place, I could tell he thought I was wasting his time, but I insisted. He cut the padlock with bolt cutters. The metal snapped with a sound that echoed all the way down the stairs. Together, we opened the hatch. The lens room was empty. Dust covered everything, a thick, undisturbed layer. No footprints, no smudges on the glass, but there weren't any. Just cold metal and still air. He told me I probably saw a bird. A reflection. Maybe fatigue. I didn't argue. I just wanted to leave. That was my last visit to 𝗥𝗲𝗍 Light. I asked to be reassigned off the coastal route, and thankfully, they agreed. But sometimes, especially during foggy nights, I find myself thinking about that pale face. The way it stared, not surprised or angry, just empty, like it had been waiting a long time. And I'd finally looked up.